Chapter 21. Touching Paradise. Your brain is tired of listening to me, and yet I still have so much I want to tell you. I do so want to, but you need to rest. Let us sit again for a little while. We sat down on the grass. Anastasia took me by the shoulders and drew me close to her. The back of my head touched her breast, which gave me a pleasant, warm feeling. Do not be afraid of me. Let yourself go, she quietly said, and lay down on the grass so that I would be more comfortable for me to rest. She ran the fingers of one of her hands through my hair, as if combing them, while the fingertips of her other hand quickly touched my forehead and temples. Occasionally she would lightly press down with her fingernails at various points on the top of my head. All this gave me a feeling of tranquility and enlightenment. Then, putting her hands on my shoulders, Anastasia said, "Listen now, and please tell me what sounds you hear around you." I listened, and my hearing caught a wide range of sounds, all different in tonality, rhythm, and continuity. I began naming the sounds aloud. The birds singing in the trees, the chirping and clicking of insects in the grass, the rustle of the leaves, the fluttering and flapping of birds' wings. I named everything I could hear, then fell silent and went on listening. This was pleasant and very interesting for me. "You have not named everything," Anastasia observed. "Everything?" I replied. "Well, maybe I left out something not very significant, or something I didn't catch. Not anything important, that is." "Vladimir, do you not hear how my heart is beating?" asked Anastasia. Could I really have not been paying attention to the sound of her heart beating? "Yes," I hastened to respond. "Of course I hear it. I hear it very well. It's beating evenly and calmly. Try to memorize the intervals of the various sounds you hear. You can choose the principal sounds and memorize them." I selected the chirping of some insects, the cawing of a crow, and the gurgling and splash of the water in the stream. "Now I shall increase the tempo of my heartbeat, and you listen to see what happens all around." Anastasia's heartbeat increased in frequency, and right away the rhythm of sounds I could hear around me joined in with a heightened tonality. "That's astounding! Simply incredible!" I exclaimed. "What are you saying, Anastasia? Are they so sensitive to the rhythm of your heartbeat?" "Yes, everything, absolutely everything, a little blade of grass, a big tree, even the bugs, they all react to any changes in the rhythm of my heart. The trees accelerate their inner processes and work harder to produce oxygen." "Is this how all the plants and animals in people's environment react?" I asked. "No, in your world they do not understand to whom they should react, and you do not try to make contact with them. Besides, you do not understand the purpose of such contact, and do not give them sufficient information about yourself. Something similar might happen between plants and the people who work on their little garden plots. If only people would do everything I outlined to you, imbue the seed with information about themselves, and begin to communicate more consciously with their plants. Do you want me to show you what man will feel when he makes such contact?" "Of course I want you to, but how will you do that?" "I shall tune the rhythm of my heartbeat to yours, and you will feel it." She slid her hands inside my shirt. Her warm palm lightly pressed against my chest. Little by little her heart adjusted its tuning and began beating in the same rhythm as mine. And something most amazing happened. I felt an unusually pleasant sensation, as though my mother and my relatives were right there beside me. A sense of softness and good health came over my body, and my heart was filled with joy, freedom, and a whole new sense of creation. The range of surrounding sounds caressed me and communicated the truth. Not a truth comprehensible in all its detail, just something I felt intuitively. I had the impression that all the pleasing and joyous feelings I had ever experienced in my life were now merging into a single and wonderful sensation. Perhaps it is this sensation that is called happiness. But as soon as Anastasia began to change the rhythm of her heartbeat, the wonderful sensation started to leave me. I asked, "More! Please, let me feel some more, Anastasia." "I cannot do that for long. After all, I have my own rhythm." "Even just a little bit more?" I pleaded. And once again Anastasia brought back the sensation of happiness just for a short time, and then everything faded, but not without leaving me with a small taste of the pleasant and radiant sensation as a memory of it. We remained silent for a while, and then I felt like hearing Anastasia's voice again, and I asked, Was it this good for the first people, Adam and Eve? You just lie around, enjoy life and prosper, everything at hand. Only it can become boring if there's nothing to do. Instead of answering my question, Anastasia asked one of her own. Tell me, Vladimir, do many people think of Adam, the first man, as you thought just now? Probably the majority. But what was there for them to do in paradise? It was only later that man started to develop and thought up everything. Man developed through labor. He became smarter thanks to labor. Yes, labor is needful, but the first man was infinitely smarter than his descendants today, and his labor was more meaningful. It demanded considerable intelligence, awareness, and will. But what did Adam do in paradise? Did he tend a garden? That is something that can be done today by any gardener, not to mention plant breeding specialists. Nothing more is said in the Bible about Adam's activity. If the Bible told everything in detail, it would be impossible to read through it in a single human lifetime. One must understand the Bible. There is so much information behind each verse. Do you want to know what Adam did? I shall tell you, but first remember that it is the Bible that tells us that God assigned Adam to give names and specify the purpose of every creature living on the earth. And he, Adam, did this. He did what all the scientific institutions in the world taken together have not yet been able to do. Anastasia, do you turn to God yourself? Do you ask him for anything for yourself? What more can I ask, when so much has already been given me? It is my task to thank him and to help him. Chapter 22. Who will bring up our son? On the way back to the river, as Anastasia was escorting me to my motorboat, we sat down to rest in the place where she had left her outer clothing, and I asked her, Anastasia, how will we bring up our son? Try to understand, Vladimir. You are not yet ready to bring him up, and when his eyes first take in a conscious awareness of the world, you should not be there. I seized her by the shoulders and gave her a shaking. What are you saying? What liberties are you taking here? I can't understand how you could have come to such one-sided conclusions. Anyway, even though the mere fact of your existence is incredible, that doesn't give you the right to decide everything yourself and in violation of all the rules of logic. Calm down, Vladimir, please. I do not know what logic you have in mind, but do try and make sense of it, calmly. What am I supposed to make sense of? The child is not only yours, he's mine too, and I want him to have a father. I want him to be well taken care of and get an education. Please understand, he does not need any kind of material benefits as you see them. He will have everything he needs right from the start. Even in his infancy, he will be taking in and making sense of so much information that your kind of education will be simply ludicrous. It is the same as sending a learned mathematician back to grade 1. You want to bring the baby some kind of senseless toy, but he has absolutely no need of it whatsoever. You are the one who needs it for your own self-satisfaction. Oh, look at me! I'm so good and caring. If you think that you will do some good by offering your son a car or anything else along that line, well, he can get it himself just by wishing for it. Be calm and think about something specific you could tell your son. Think about what you could teach him. Think about what you have done in life that he might find interesting. Anastasia continued talking in soft, quiet tones, but her words still made me tremble. You see, Vladimir, when he begins to make sense of creation, you will look like an underdeveloped creature next to him. Do you really want that? Do you really want your son to see you standing there like a dimwit? The only thing that can bring the two of you together is your level of mental purity. But few attain that level in your world. You must strive to attain it. I realized that it was absolutely useless to argue with her, and I cried out in despair. Does that mean he'll never know anything about me? I shall tell him about you, about your world, when he is able to comprehend it in a meaningful way and make his own decisions. What he will do then, I do not know. Despair, pain, resentment, fear, conjecture, All these swirled around in my brain. I felt like smashing this beautiful intellectual recluse's face with all my might. I understood everything, and what I understood left me breathless. It's all clear. Now, it's all clear to me. You had nobody to bang with to give you a child. That business at the beginning, that was all just an act. You sly vixen. You made yourself into a nun. You needed a child. But you did go to Moscow. She sold her mushrooms and berries. Ha! You could have got yourself a shag there right on the street. All you had to do was take off that jacket and shawl of yours, and you would have had takers right off. Then you wouldn't have needed to spin your web and trap me in it. Of course, you needed a man who was dreaming about a son, and you've got yours. Did you ever think about the child, about your son, one destined in advance to live the life of a recluse, to live the way you think he should? Come on now. Here she's been sounding off about the truth. You've got an awful lot of gall, you hermit. What is it with you? Trust as a last resort? Well, did you ever think about me? Me? I dreamt about a son. I dreamt about passing along my business to him. I'd teach him to be a businessman. I wanted a son to love. And now how am I supposed to live? To live and to know that your precious little son is crawling around unprotected somewhere out in the wilds of the taiga, with no future, with no father? That's what breaks my heart. But that's not something you can understand, you forest bitch. Perhaps, Anastasia quietly responded. Your heart will gain the awareness it needs, and everything will be all right. A pain like that will cleanse the soul, accelerate thought, and summon you to creation. But I was still burning with rage and anger. I wasn't in control of myself. I grabbed a stick, I ran away from Anastasia, and began beating the stick against a small tree with all my might until the stick broke. Then I turned to look at Anastasia standing there, and oh, how she appeared to me. Incredibly, the anger started to leave. I thought to myself, oh, now I've gone and done it again. I lost control of myself and went wild, just like the last time when I swore at her. Anastasia was standing there against a tree, one arm stretched upward, her head bent forward as though withstanding the onslaught of a hurricane. With my anger completely gone, I went closer and began looking at her. Now her hands were clasped to her chest and her body slightly trembling. She didn't speak. Only her kind eyes were looking at me with the same tenderness as before. We stood there that way for some time, just looking at each other, and I started reflecting along these lines. There is no doubt about it. She is incapable of lying. She didn't have to say anything, but she knew it would be hard, and yet she spoke. Of course, that too is a challenge. How can you possibly live if you must always tell the truth and say only what you think? But what can you do if that's the way she is and can't be anything else? What's done is done. Everything happened the way it happened. Now she will be the mother of my son. She will be a mother, if she said so. Of course, she'll be a pretty strange mother. That lifestyle of hers, and her way of thinking. Oh, well, there's nothing to be done with her. Still, she's physically very strong and kind. She really knows nature well, knows the animals, and she's smart. In her own peculiar way, at least. In any case, she knows a lot about raising children. She kept wanting to talk about children the whole time. She'll nurture the boy. Somebody like her will definitely nurture him. She'll get him through the cold, through snowstorms even. They mean nothing to her. She'll nurture him, yes indeed, and she'll bring him up right. And somehow I've got to adapt to the situation. I'll come and see them in the summertime. Like going to a dacha. No way in the winter. I wouldn't make it. But in the summer I can play with my son. He'll grow up and I'll tell him about the people in big cities. At any rate, this time I've got to apologize to her. And I said, I'm sorry, Anastasia. I got nervous again. And right off she said, You are not to blame, only do not be hard on yourself. Do not worry. After all, you were concerned about your son. You were afraid that things would turn out bad for him, that the mother of your son was just an ordinary bitch, that she could not love with real human love. But you must not worry. You must not get upset. You talked that way because you did not know. You did not know anything about my love. my darling. Chapter 23. Through a Window of Time. Anastasia, if you are so smart and omnipotent, that means you could help me? She looked up at the sky, and then again at me. In the whole... Chapter 23. Through a Window of Time. Anastasia, if you are so smart and omnipotent, that means you could help me? She looked up at the sky, and then again at me. In the whole of the universe there is no being capable of more powerful development and greater freedom than man. All other civilizations bow before man. All sorts of civilizations have the capability of developing and bringing themselves to perfection, but only in one direction, and they are not free. Even the greatness of man is beyond their grasp. God, the great mind, created man, and to no one else gave he more than to man. I could not make sense, at least right off, of what she was saying, and again I uttered the same question, pleading for help, not fully understanding what kind of help I needed. She asked me, "What is it that you have in mind? Do you want me to cure all your physical ailments?" That is a simple matter for me. I already did this 6 months ago, only in the principal area of need no benefit came about. The dark and destructive elements common to people of your world have not lessened in you, and your various aches and pains are trying to come back again. "You witch, mad woman, hermit, get out of here this instant," you're probably thinking, right? "Yes," I answered in amazement. "That is exactly what I was thinking. You read my mind?" "I surmise that is what you might be thinking. Indeed, it is written all over your face. Tell me, Vladimir, do you not, remember me at least a little?" The question dumbfounded me, and I began carefully examining her facial features, especially her eyes. I really began to think that I might have seen them somewhere before, but where? "Anastasia, you said yourself that you spend all your time in the forest. How, then, could I have seen you?" She gave me a smile and ran off. A short while later, Anastasia came out from behind the bushes dressed in a long skirt, a brown buttoned cardigan, her hair done up in a shawl, but without the quilted jacket in which she had greeted me on the river bank. And the shawl was tied differently. Her clothes were clean, though not stylish, and her shawl covered her forehead and neck, and I remembered her. Chapter 25. Bugs. That day I had decided to join in Anastasia's morning routine. Everything went fine at first. I stood under the tree and touched various little shoots. She told me about different herbs, and then I lay down beside her on the grass. We were both completely naked, but even I wasn't cold. That might have been, of course, due to my running through the forest with her. I was in a splendid mood. I felt a sense of lightness, and not just physically, but inside me as well. It all started when I felt a pinching sensation on my thigh. I raised my head, and I saw a small army of bugs crawling along my thigh and lower leg, including ants and some sort of beetle. I lifted my arm to swat at them, but to no avail. Anastasia seized my arm in midair and held it, saying, "Do not touch them." Then she got up on her knees in front of me, bent over, and pinned my other hand to the ground. I lay there as if crucified. I tried to free my arms, but I couldn't. I felt that it was an impossibility. Then I tried to jerk myself free with great effort. She kept restraining me with very little effort, her smile never fading from her face, and still my body felt more and more crawling things, all tickling, biting, and pinching, and I came to the conclusion that they were starting to eat me alive. I was in her hands, both literally and figuratively. Taking stock of the situation, I realized that nobody knew where I was. Nobody would come here looking for me, and if they should happen to wander by, they would see my picked-over bones. Indeed, if they saw any bones at all. And all sorts of things flashed through my head at that moment. And this was no doubt the reason my instinct for self-preservation kicked in, dictating the only feasible course of action in the situation. In desperation, I sunk my teeth with all my might into Anastasia's bare breast, at the same time jerking my head from side to side. Upon hearing her scream, I immediately loosened my grip on her breast. Anastasia loosened her hold, jumped up, one hand holding her breast, the other stretched upward, waving. She tried to smile, too. I, too, jumped up and shouted at her, feverishly brushing the crawling things off my leg. "You wanted to feed me to those vermin, you forest witch? Well, I don't give in that easily." She continued waving and responding with a forced smile to the elements of nature around her, which had begun reacting warily to her situation. Anastasia looked at me and slowly, not with her usual sprightly gait, walked toward the lake, her head bowed. I kept standing in the same spot for some time, thinking what I should do next. Return to the river bank? But how would I find the way? Follow Anastasia? But what would be the point? Nevertheless, I headed for the lake shore. Anastasia was sitting on the shore, rubbing tufts of grass between the palms of her hands and dabbing its juice on the part of her breast where the huge bruise left by my bite was clearly visible. It was probably very painful for her. But what had been her thought in attempting to restrain me? I hovered around her for a little while before asking, "Does it hurt?" Without turning her head, she replied, "It hurts more inside," and she silently continued rubbing in the juice from the tufts of grass. "Why were you thinking to play tricks on me?" "I was trying to be helpful. The pores of your skin are all plugged up. They cannot breathe. The little bugs would have cleaned them out. It is not that painful. In fact, it's rather pleasant." "And the snake I saw? Wouldn't it have stung me in the leg?" "It was not doing you any harm. Even if it had released its venom, it would have been only on the surface, and I would have rubbed it in at once. The skin and muscles on your heel are deteriorating." "That's on account of a car accident," I said. For a time, neither of us spoke. The whole situation felt rather silly. Not really knowing what to say, I asked her, "What happened? Why did not that invisible someone help you again as before when I lost consciousness?" "The reason he did not help was that I was smiling. And when you began biting me, I tried to smile." I began to feel uncomfortable in her presence. Picking up a tuft of grass, I rubbed it between my hands as hard as I could. Then I knelt down in front of her and began dabbing her bruise with my moistened palms.